Okay, these are your notes on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. You're going to need two colored pencils or markers while you take your notes, so make sure you have those ready now. Okay, this period of time called the Pax Romana ended in about 180 CE or AD. It had started under Augustus, that's when all this great stuff is happening in Rome. But eventually that period ends, and power is taken by a series of short-lived emperors. These are guys who are holding power for a year, less than a year, a couple of years, and then they're being murdered, usually, by somebody who wants to take power from them. And as you can imagine, when you don't have continuity, when people are getting killed all the time who are in charge, it makes things more difficult. Other problems that are happening in Rome. There are high taxes. In order to pay for all that great stuff under the Pax Romana, the emperor had taxed the people at a very high rate, so people don't have enough money because so much of their money has gone to the government. In addition, there were so many slaves that the people who were farmers had to either move to the city because their work was overtaken by slaves, or they had to basically work in partial slavery for the wealthy people in order to have a job at all. And we'll talk about later how that connects to the feudal system in the Middle Ages. So here's this guy Diocletian in this very fuzzy photograph of a portrait bust. Okay, that's a sculpture of just somebody's head and shoulders. Diocletian rules Rome from 284 to 305. That's number 1 on your notes. And his big legacy is putting in economic rules. He fixed prices. He says, this is how much a pound of grain costs, this is how much dairy costs, this is how much things cost. He also says, farmers, you are not allowed to leave your land. You may not move to the city. You have to stay there and be farmers. And not only farmers having to stay on their land, but no matter who you are, you must do the job that your father did. So that way, we're still going to have enough of every single profession. So if your dad was a blacksmith, you're going to be a blacksmith. If your dad was a farmer, you're going to be a farmer. You have no choice whatsoever. The last thing that he did was to divide the empire up into two parts, an Eastern Empire and a Western Empire. He decided the empire had gotten too big and that they needed to divide it up in order to control everything that was going on in it. So this is how they divided up the empire, and here's where you need your colored pencils or markers. What you need to do is pause this video, take a moment to outline or shade in different colors the Western Roman Empire, which is this area over here, and the Eastern Roman Empire over here. So you can see Rome, the city, is in the Western Empire, and this is basically Western Europe. The Eastern Empire is this part that's more of the Middle East, Egypt, Greece, this area over here. So take a moment to shade those and then continue on. Okay, the next important emperor is Constantine, and this statue of Constantine that this picture is from is giant. This is a giant statue of Constantine that he had built to himself in the city of Rome. It's so big, like, I came up to its ankles when I stood next to it. Constantine ruled Rome from 312 to 337 AD or CE. He issued the Edict of Milan, which we talked about in your Christianity notes. It granted tolerance to Christians. It said it was okay to be a Christian. You couldn't be persecuted for being a Christian in Rome. It basically granted religious freedom in Rome for everyone, not just Christians. And he creates a new capital for the eastern side of the emperor, and he names it after himself, Constantinople. So now there's not just Rome as the empire, there's Constantinople, which is the capital of the Eastern Empire as well. So as you can see, Rome is starting to split into two distinct parts. They're not the same anymore. All right, Rome is really, really big. It's got a lot of borders, and the more borders you have, the harder it is to control. People are seeing that things aren't going as well for Rome as they used to be, and they want to come and try to get some of the good stuff in Rome. So these people from what is basically Germany, and they're called Germanic tribes, start to invade. They want to come into the area that Rome occupies because it's a better climate and there's better land than there is further north where they live. They want to take some of Rome's wealth, and they themselves are running away from a group of people called the Huns, who are from Central Asia. There's a particular Germanic tribe called the Visigoths, who were important amongst the other Germanic tribes, okay? They were one of the big ones. They rebelled against the Romans. The Romans had come over and taken over some of the land that they had occupied. They didn't want to be ruled by the Romans anymore, and they rebelled. And in 410, led by their leader, whose name was Alaric or Alaric, they captured and sacked the city of Rome. So they invade Rome and they take over the city of Rome. And some people say this is the fall of Rome. Then come the Huns, these guys that the Germanic tribes were running away from. They came into Rome from Central Asia. They were led by Attila the Hun, and they raided the Eastern Empire. So they were trying to take over the eastern half of Rome. Then they moved themselves west into Italy. They terrorized Italy. They attacked everyone. They messed everything up. Everything was a mess. But when Attila died, their organization fell apart and they retreated back to Asia where they had come from. So what's going on with Rome's military? All these people are attacking. Their military must be working really hard. The military is trying to deal with these foreign invasions. The army, though, because they don't have enough time to train, they're no longer the professional fighting force that was able to go and conquer everything. They lack training, they lack discipline. The empire doesn't have the money to train them, so they're not doing as well as they used to. And in order to supplement the military that they have, the Roman army starts to hire people called mercenaries. Mercenaries are foreign soldiers that you pay to fight on your side. So they tried to get these mercenaries to come and to serve Rome, but these guys are not loyal to Rome. They don't have the same dedication, and so it's a lot easier for them to give in or not fight as hard as somebody who is really invested in Rome would do. What was going on in politics with all this invasion and mess going on? The government is very, very strict. When the government's telling you what to do all the time, how do you react to that? Probably not very well. There are also no rules of succession. We talked about this when we talked about Augustus. He didn't create any rules to determine who was going to come next when he died. And the same thing happened with all the other emperors. Nobody ever put into place rules for how to determine who came next. The officials in the government are getting more and more corrupt. They want money. As the bigger the empire gets, the more people you have working for it, the more likely you are to have people who are not doing the best. And this divided empire is very weak. It's not communicating well. Things are a mess. The last political cause is really part political and part religious. As Christianity spread, people started to believe that the emperor wasn't the most important person anymore. Remember, Romans had worshipped the emperor like a god. They went to temples to the emperor and made sacrifices to the emperor like a god. And when they began to believe in Christianity, when Christianity spread, they no longer were worshiping the emperor. They were going to churches and they were praying to God or to Jesus as the representative of God. So their affiliation, their loyalty is moving away from the emperor and moving to the church. All right, we've got this army. It's very big. We've got this government. It's very big. How are we going to pay for it? We have to tax people. That means people don't have as much money for themselves. Taxes are good, but if taxes get too high, then people can't support themselves the way they need to. The middle class, the merchants, the artisans, the plebeians, okay, are losing their money and they're losing their land. There's a great reliance on slavery. Remember I said earlier that the slaves were doing all of the jobs that the people used to do. The population is falling because they're fighting all the time and people are dying, and because disease is spreading. There's a plague that spreads through Rome, and we'll talk about that pretty soon in class. There's a moral decay, okay? People are no longer loyal to each other. There's a loss of values. Things are kind of falling apart. People are not behaving in a good way anymore. And remember when we talked about bread and circuses, how the government was giving away free food and providing free entertainment for people? People came to rely on that food in particular. That was their main source of food, and it was expensive to provide, but they couldn't not provide it or else people would starve. So what happened when Rome fell? Some scholars say that Rome never fell. Some scholars say that the Roman Empire became the Catholic Church and that it still has not fallen. Although on the date that I'm recording this, the Pope is resigning. It's his last official day, which is an interesting coincidence. In 455, a group of people, of a Germanic people called the Vandals, raid Rome. Okay, they come in and they take over everything. Remember, that's about 45 years after the Visigoths had come and raided the city. And then 20 years later, a Vandal leader named Odoacer overthrows the emperor of Rome. He takes over, and essentially this is the fall of the Roman Empire. We're going to talk more about this in class. We're going to talk about how they cut off the city of Rome from all their supplies and basically starved them out. But the Roman Empire ended, most people agree, in the late 400s. We'll talk soon about the Byzantines, who are the people that the eastern part of the empire kind of transforms into. Remember, you'll have a quiz on these notes next class. Make sure you have them complete and ready to go.